Never activate your AirDrop. Hello everyone, my name is Jade, I'm 21 years old. I'm going to tell you a story that happened in 2017, when I was 16. I went on vacation with my little sister Alice and her best friend Tia, both 14 years old. Like every summer, we usually go to Karnak, a town in Brittany, where we stay in the same residence each time because it belongs to a friend of our father's. The residence in question is made up of several small houses with a shared swimming pool. There is no pedestrian entrance to the residence, meaning that the entrance for cars and pedestrians is the same. And since there is no badge, the residence is always open to facilitate access. The gardens of the houses are also designed the same way. They're not gated, and anyone can walk through their neighbor's garden, something that happens quite often and doesn't bother anyone. Our house is right next to a driveway and very close to the pool, which increases the chance of people walking past or through our garden. Our misadventure began at the beach. We wouldn't find out until a few days later because at the time we didn't pay attention to it. Alice, Tia, and I always did everything together, and since the beach is less than 5 minutes from the residence and the town center less than 10 minutes away, we were never accompanied by adults and had a certain amount of freedom. So, right in the middle of a girly conversation on the beach, I received an airdrop and spotted a picture of feet. At first, I didn't pay any attention to the name sending me the airdrop. I found it funny and decided to accept the photo. It showed a picture of feet in the sand with writing that said, "You're going to die." I laughed and leaned toward Alice and Tia, saying, "Very funny." At the time, they didn't understand, but being sure it was them, I didn't show them the photo and we continued our conversation normally. Nothing unusual happened after that until the next afternoon. We were still on the beach, and I received the same photo of feet with the writing, "You're going to die again." The joke didn't make me laugh anymore, and I told Alice and Tia to stop, because it was funny once, but not twice. So, this was the first time they saw the photo and looked shocked, saying it wasn't them. I didn't believe them and moved on. So we went home and it was evening. It was worth noting that all three of us slept in the same room. I usually go to bed later than Alice and Tia, because I often watch movies late into the night on my phone. While the girls are asleep, I'm interrupted by an airdrop request, always the same photo. And then I have two thoughts. The first is that the name of the iPhone sending me the photo has a very strange name. I can't remember the details, but it was a jumble of letters that didn't mean anything. The second is that since Alice and Tia are already asleep, it's impossible for it to be them. At that moment, I start to panic, because this means that someone outside has been sending me airdrop messages all along and has followed us into our house. I then decide to wake the girls up to let them know. We're both stressed out, but too scared to check if there's anyone outside. Several days go by without anything happening. So we thought it was a bad joke from the kids at the residence and quickly forgot about it. A week later, the day before we were due to leave, we decided to visit the abandoned house that was just a stone's throw from our residence, just to make a point before leaving. Our mother had strictly forbidden us from going there because she had seen the look on our face when we saw the house a few days earlier during our stay. An abandoned house means a house that is not maintained, and therefore there is a risk that the floor will collapse, etc. But we were young and we didn't care. All we wanted was to give ourselves a little scare and have fun. I want to point out that we had really forgotten about this airdrop story because, since the one sent to the room, I hadn't received anything since. So we arrived at the forbidden place and entered the house. The door must have been forced open by someone beforehand, as it was open. We decided to sneak out during the night, because an abandoned house is always best visited at night to make it even more frightening. Inside, we thought that a horror movie could really be set in this house. There was debris everywhere, a lot of dust, and especially lots of graffiti on the walls. The house was old, the wood creaked, and we were feeling stressed, scaring ourselves by saying there were ghosts. However, we heard a noise that didn't sound at all like creaking wood, or a noise you might hear in a house. The noise we heard was a shrill noise, like metal, with a perfect repetition frequency. We started looking for where the noise was coming from, but without success. The next moment, Alice and I receive an airdrop request. Tia has a Samsung. We immediately noticed the name of the iPhone that had sent me the airdrop a week earlier. But this time, it's not the same photo as usual, so we decide not to accept the airdrop, but we can see the photo sent. Even though the photo is dark, we can see us inside the house. The photo seems to have been taken from outside the house and only a few meters away. At that moment, we really start to panic because we make the connection with all the other times I've received strange airdrops, and we think that maybe this person is finally serious and wants to harm us. So we automatically head towards the window where the photo was taken and see a shadow like a ball, which is perfectly located where the noise is coming from. Because yes, the noise was still going on. We really wondered what was going on and stood there staring at this thing for a few minutes. It was dark, so we couldn't see very well, but suddenly the silhouette changed shape. It was indeed a man. He suddenly stood up and, with what looked like a knife, struck the post next to him. So he was the source of the noise. We were sure now this stranger had been sending us the airdrops from the beginning, because there was no one around. But it didn't stop there. He suddenly started to accelerate. And that's when we decided to quickly run out of the house. We knew that if we came face to face with this stranger, something very serious could happen. Luckily, the back door was also open. We wouldn't have had time to escape him if we had had to go through the front door. We ran as fast as we could without looking back and arrived at the residence. Once we arrived, we noticed that we could no longer hear the stranger following us, but we did hear a laugh, quite far away, which made us shiver. He stopped in the middle of the road, turned around, and then left again, laughing. We hurried back into the house and finally realized what had just happened to us. We thought we had escaped the worst. We never told our parents this story because we were forbidden from going there and were afraid of the repercussions. The same went for the police. We knew full well that we weren't allowed in that house, which wasn't our property, and so we kept quiet. That night, we didn't sleep until the early hours of the morning when we left. Since then, I've left my airdrop to my contacts only, and I still feel a strange sensation when I receive airdrops from my friends. After reflection, we think this person had been following us for a while since he probably managed to hear our first names in the conversation, so he could send it to me in person each time. P.S. We're currently in the same residence while writing our story, and we found it symbolic to tell it while actually being there. The abandoned house is still there with its graffiti, but we won't be setting foot in it. I hope this story can raise awareness among young people who read it, because even if we like to scare ourselves, sometimes it can cost us our lives, or at least, like us, become a traumatic memory. Ahmed, the Scary Neighbor. This story, because it's more of a story than a short event, took place 4 years ago when I was living in my first apartment, alone. At the time, I was just 18 years old and had just started my studies at the University of Aix-en-Provence, which was very close to my apartment. As an anecdote, if I lit up my cigarette downstairs, I wouldn't have time to finish it before arriving at the door of my university. My building was, in the 2000s, a hotel, and each apartment was actually a former room of the hotel, like a restaurant or a reception room for the larger apartments, which were on the ground floor, and bedrooms for the smaller ones, like mine, which was located on the top floor. My apartment wasn't great, really small and poorly laid out, with a rather large entrance. Understandable in a hotel room, but completely useless in an apartment. No light in my kitchen, and to top it all off, the toilet was separate from the shower, but the shower was in the kitchen. Who knows why? But I was broke. I didn't know anyone in the city, so I stayed. I had a few neighbors, but I didn't see them often, partly because the building was actually quite big, but also because not all the apartments were rented. It was also a time when I was going out a lot, throwing a lot of parties, and the layout of my apartment didn't really allow me to invite people over, so after 7 p.m., I was generally gone. However, when I came home from university one day, I saw a man enter the building. I immediately noticed he was completely wasted, possibly a little stoned, but I'd never seen him before. I took the stairs and noticed he was on the 3rd floor, in front of the door of an apartment near mine. I live on number 36, he was on number 38, trying to open the door with keys. After that, I saw him from time to time, either drunk, stoned, or coming downstairs, sometimes with a dog on a leash who looked old and sick. A few weeks after that, I was working on a very important project for the university when I heard a knock on my door. It might be completely trivial to you, but it immediately sent shivers down my spine. There was no intercom in my building, and to get in, you had to call me and I'd go downstairs and open the door for the person. So no one except a neighbor could knock directly on my door. And since I didn't know any of my neighbors, the situation seemed at best surprising, at worst slightly disturbing. I looked through the peephole and saw my drunk neighbor standing in front of my door. I opened it and asked him what was wrong. He introduced himself, told me his name was Ahmed, but besides being drunk, he seemed particularly nervous. He started to spout off a stream of words, telling me that the neighbors were harassing him, that they were cruel to him, that they were plotting to get him kicked out of the building, and that they were always complaining about him and his dog. He also told me that I seemed nice and that I knew what it was like to come home drunk. Yes, I did come home drunk sometimes, but unless he was spying on me, I don't see how he could have known, since I had never run into him coming home from parties. I calmly told him it was none of my business, to speak to the building manager, and I closed the door. The following night, the power was out in my apartment, and having nothing to do, I went to bed early. Around midnight, a loud noise coming from the building's lobby woke me up. I got up looking for my glasses when I heard a huge bang on my door. I threw myself at it after grabbing a statuette of Aphrodite to defend myself. Yes, I know it's ridiculous. And looked through the peephole. And then my blood ran cold. I saw Ahmed staring at my door, visibly very nervous and with a slightly strained smile on his lips. I was in the dark in my apartment, and it was the first time I felt truly weak. My legs gave out, I fell to the ground, and I started to cry, trying to remain silent. I got up a few seconds or minutes later, looked through the peephole, and Ahmed was gone. I went to my desk, lit by candlelight, and waited there, unable to go back to sleep. The next day, when I left the apartment to meet some friends and reassure myself a little, I noticed something written on my doorframe in big pen. I stiffened when I read the words, clearly with immense anger given the impulsiveness of the words, "You jerk, I'm coming for you. You coward weakling. Just disappear already. Disappear. Disappear." I immediately told my parents, who told me we were going to start looking for a new apartment. I then went to the police station to file a complaint, and they told me it was impossible because there was no direct attack and no evidence against Ahmed. I went to live with a friend for a while, and 3 days later, while returning to pick up some things, I ran into a man who immediately stopped me. It was Ahmed's landlord, who told me he'd been evicted because he'd stopped paying rent, had been the subject of several complaints, and had attempted to sexually assault another tenant. So I was relatively reassured, but I still left my apartment, afraid Ahmed would return to the building. Today, I'm no longer afraid, but if you're reading this, Ahmed, I hope we never cross paths again. The crazy subscriber. This is a throwaway account. I don't feel safe enough to discuss this story with my personal Reddit account yet. I know this person was still monitoring my every move a few weeks ago. I've moved and changed jobs, but I'm still afraid. Until very recently, I worked on the team of an extremely influential gaming streamer whose name I won't reveal for obvious reasons. For the sake of clarity, I'll call her Josie. I was in charge of relations. I arranged press meetings, I communicated with brands, and I managed her moderators. Josie's subscribers used to see me on Discord, and overall we got along very well. At the time I was living in Bordeaux, and I know it's not very professional, but I had occasionally met subscribers outside of work to go out for drinks and things like that. Even now that I've quit my job, some of them are still friends, and a girl I met on stream is even going to be my best man. Josie didn't care as long as it didn't affect my work, as long as there was no favoritism or conflict of interest. That night, a girl from the waiter who wanted to celebrate the end of her midterms invited us to a club in town. With her was a guy I didn't know who had come with his girlfriend. He must have been a little older than me, and he looked like a metalhead. Apparently, he was also a subscriber of Josie's, but I hadn't spoken to him much. His name was Fabien. The evening went well, we all went home, and I didn't think about it much anymore. A few days later, the girl who invited us sent me a DM on Twitter, joking that Fabien wouldn't stop talking about me and that something was going on. Sometimes followers become very fanboys toward me, because I'm in contact with them every day, and they see me as the closest possible person to their idol. It's annoying, but after a while, you get over it. Since Fabien also has a girlfriend, I'm not worried. That evening, as I'm getting out of the shower, I have several notifications waiting. It's Fabien. He's not well. He's broken up with his girlfriend. He starts making grand declarations of love. I try to calm him down. This lasts until 6 a.m. Finally, he begs me to have a drink with him at the same bar my friend had invited us to. I tell him it won't be possible and find a floppy disk. His next message chilled me to the bone. "I'll pick you up at your place." I would learn much later that he had managed to find my address thanks to a photo Josie had posted on Twitter of us standing on my balcony. Below, we could see a store sign, and he had found it online before calculating the angle of the photo using Google Street View. I spent the evening waiting, holed up behind my door, before finally receiving a message saying he was back with his girlfriend. A day after they broke up. Later, she would ask me for an explanation, which I would give her completely frankly, and which he would deny completely, calling me crazy, a liar, etc. Given his personality, people preferred to believe me, and he apparently took it badly. I knew he kept trying to find out things about me from other members, but I eventually moved on. I met my fiancé. As he liked Josie's work, he joined her Discord, and he was very active in the lives, where he sometimes made dedications to me, like, "It's my darling who moderates, good luck to her." This didn't please Fabien at all, who started to attack him. One evening, the Discord was raided by bots who all posted the same thing. A hot deepfake of me, also made with the photo from Josie's Twitter, which she had deleted but which he had to download. Obviously, he was banned. He then created no fewer than 135 accounts using a VPN, using usernames that included threats like my real name that I never gave him. And, most importantly, what made me decide to file a police report with the police. Paris Games Week. 2020. I'd have a knife. I've never been so happy that conventions are canceled. My scary story. My story happened a few hours ago. I was watching the Champions League final with some friends at a friend's house less than 2 kilometers from mine. At the end of the match, everyone went home. My friends left me at an intersection because they lived on the other side. So I was alone. To get home, I had to go through a passage, a sort of mini forest, to save time. It was pitch black because the town hall turns off the lights at 10 p.m. On my way home near the forest, I didn't feel well, and that rarely happens to me on my way home. I told myself it was nothing and that I shouldn't worry. I was wrong. In the distance, I heard the sound of bicycles flashing for at least 30 seconds, then nothing. I didn't necessarily pay attention to it, even though it was really weird. And a few seconds later, I felt really bad. As if someone were watching me, I was feeling oppressed. I heard footsteps, my brain told me to look behind me, and as I turned around, I saw a figure walking very discreetly, slightly crouched, with what I thought was an object in its hands. Seeing this, I immediately ran like I'd never run before. I heard these footsteps speeding up for about 10 seconds, then I stopped hearing them. But I kept sprinting. I even fell to the ground 200 meters from my house. What scares me is that during that entire time, this guy didn't even say a word. I only heard his footsteps and his breathing. He was breathing heavily. Then I went home without ever looking back, and I stayed on my terrace with my mother to tell her everything, and I didn't see him walk past my house. If you made it this far, you're officially one of the brave ones. Don't forget to subscribe, there's more where that came from. Check out my other videos for more real horror stories that'll make you sleep with the lights on. Until next time.